King Arthur is putting together an army, and the boss has a war college. And he wants his own people to be in charge of the army because military technology is wildly different from knights on horseback to, modern battles. And even at the Civil War era, this is right after the Civil War era. This is late 1800s, early 1900s, right around then. So, and the boss is like, I worked at a gun manufacturer, so he is probably going to be making guns. And since he has fireworks, he's 90% of the way there. All he needs to do is, instead of making rockets, he just puts a gunpowder at the bottom of a sealed tube, light it, shoots it off, and you have a cannon. If you make it smaller, you have a handgun. Now, all he needs to do is tighten up the tolerances, make it well. And it's precision work, which you need machinery for, and precision machinery. But at the same time, he has telephones, which are not easy to make. It's probably easier. It's probably easier to build a revolver than it is to build a telephone. Anyway, he has telephones going, and he has telephone lines stretched all over the place, which is just really kind of absurd. Because in order to run a telephone line, you need miles and miles of copper wire, and you need it insulated. And you actually, for long runs, you need boosters because the voltage drops the longer the line goes. And so what ends up happening is that you have 60 volts as the standard for a telephone line. And 60 volts will give you a good shock. But the problem is that you lose all of these volts going down the line, miles and miles. The resistance gets absurd. And then miles and miles back. So even back then, they had repeating stations every couple of miles where it boosts the voltage difference and to pass along the signal. And so transatlantic telephone lines were absolutely horrible for the longest time until they managed to get the boosters in line on the telephone lines. But here he is, he's running telephone lines, and he's able to communicate these things with back at Camelot. So he's call up Camelot. Hello, Camelot, what's going on? Oh, King's coming. Good to hear. He's bringing his military. Why wasn't I informed about his military? What? He has none of our people in his military? Get me West Point. He calls up West Point. And he named his military academy West Point after the U.S. Military Academy in West Point, New York, just north of the city. Now, the U.S. has 3 military academies. There's West Point for the Army. There is Annapolis for the Navy. And there is the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I guess Annapolis is technically the U.S. Naval Academy, but it's Annapolis. Annapolis is on US 50, which is the road that I take when I go to the beach because it crosses over the Chesapeake Bay with this really cool tall bridge. Maybe we'll go on it sometime. But US 50 runs through Annapolis, and US 50 goes all the way from Ocean City, Maryland to Palm Springs, California. Long Beach goes all the way to Long Beach, California. So it runs ocean to ocean. Anyway, named his military academy West Point. Now, communications are one of the great overlooked advancements in warfare. So much in warfare advanced because of telegraphs and telephones and radio communications. That's one of the overlooked advantages that the North had during the Civil War, because the North had massive amounts of telegraphs. And so if there were spies or there were scouts who caught the South massing, it's like, hey, we have a bunch of people massing here. Well, you get a telegraph message out, and okay, all we have to do is avoid this, and then we can hit all of these soft places and then cut off their supply lines. So there were all sorts of things like that that went along. And the armies, as they went, they built telegraph lines. So on Sherman's march to the sea, he was putting down telegraph lines. And although nobody really knew where he was, once he got to Savannah, he sent a message to Lincoln and said, "Hey, I need our lift." So he sent a telegraph to Lincoln saying, "I present as a Christmas present the city of Savannah." And yeah, that was just Sherman, because Sherman was like that. Now, the rival magician in this chapter, his magic involves telling people what famous people on the far side of the planet are doing right at this moment. And it's a great scam because no one can ever prove it false. Because no one has the ability to know what somebody a city over, much less on the far side of the planet, is doing. Oh yes, this person in the Raja of India is currently trimming his toenails and giving money to a beggar. 3 silver coins. No one can verify that. No one knew where India was. People barely knew where Scotland was, and Scotland's just north of England. So it's like, oh yeah, King Arthur. Yeah, he's going on a ride, going out to the sea. Actually, he's napping right now. He's going to the sea tomorrow. It'll take him 3 days to get there. The boss is like, no, he's not napping, he's riding. He's going to be here the day after tomorrow. The magician's like, no. And he doubles down. He's like, no, he's just even called off his trip. He's just going to sit around Camelot. And so here he was in the other magician is in a position where he's going to lose face if King Arthur shows up. At the same time, he can't really go back on what he's saying because, if he changes his mind, then all of a sudden people stop believing him. And once people stop believing him, then, people stop believing him, and he can't say, oh, yes, here's what I can tell you about this far-off place on the far side of the planet and what this mighty king is doing, leading an army into battle and waving these giant pink banners. And, he can't make up these lies and have people believe him anymore. And then he's actually going to have to start working for a living. So that just made me remember a movie called The Princess Bride. And The Princess Bride is classic romantic swashbuckling sort of thing. And one of the characters is the Dread Pirate Roberts. And the Dread Pirate Roberts works on information and misinformation. Because he was a pirate. And he was known for not taking prisoners. So if you went and you fought the Dread Pirate Roberts, he was going to kill you and kill everybody. No prisoners, no survivors. You just have this derelict ship, stripped of cargo, floating out there, Dread Pirate Roberts. So the moment the Dread Pirate Roberts showed up, everyone went, we surrender, take our stuff, let us live. And so that was an easy scam. Because once everyone was like, okay, he's going to kill everybody, but if we surrender, we can live. People started doing it. And at one point in the movie, the character commented, once you start taking prisoners, word gets out that you've gone soft and it's nothing but work, work, work. So here you have the boss, and he just commented the same sort of thing. It's like, okay, yeah, I can keep these people believing anything, but, I'm going to have to keep working at it. And so it's like, okay, I can't slack off. I have to be at least somewhat diligent about this. But he has another plan. He had another plan before he found out about the rival magician. And the other plan is that he was going to go out in disguise and see the kingdom and talk to people. And this is a classic. This is a classic thing where you have the man of the people, where you have the king going and walking with his walking among his people in disguise. Shakespeare did this. Henry IV, I think, where he has the king go out talking to people. It's like, so are you ready for tomorrow? Everyone's like, yeah. He's like, okay, we're good. So it's Henry IV. No, it wasn't Henry IV. I'll look it up. I'll put it in the comments. But so the king goes out and he walks among his people. Nelson was famous for walking among the ships. Grant dressed typically in a private's uniform, but that was for different reasons. Because during the Civil War, they started having sharpshooters and people with long rifles and good range. And there was famously a general who stood up on the battlements. Is like, what are you guys hiding for? There's single shots. They couldn't hit the broadside of an elephant at this range. And he got shot down. So, great last words. Single shots. They can't hit an elephant from this range and get shot. That's just sort of inviting karmic retribution. But so, Grant typically dressed down for a general because, it was kind of safer, but at the same time, it allowed him to bond with the common soldiers. Emperor Hadrian of the Romans, who built Hadrian's Wall, which is the line that separates England from Scotland. So, I mean, this is somebody who made a border that lasted for 2,000 years. No, not quite 2,000 years. It was 1,400, 1,700 years, 1,800 years. He made a border then that lasted a long, long time. And he made a wall between England and Scotland. It's like Rome is on this side, Celts are on that side. We'll deal with it. But Hadrian walked the entire span of the Roman Empire. He set out from Rome, walked down around Gaul, Spain, France, up through England, round through Germany, Istanbul, Constantinople, Turkey, Asia Minor, the Levant, Egypt, walked back. Did this all on foot, saw the entire Roman Empire. So the boss has the same idea. He's going to dress up as a peasant. He's going to have a little bit of creature comforts, but he's just going to go and see what everybody's doing to see how to fix things. Because, that's his big thing, is he wants to build up the world and make the world an essentially better place. Which is, there's joke about that. It's like, there's a number of jokes along those lines. It's like, why are there no engineers in hell? Or there's a joke. It starts out, engineers going up to pearly gates, and he says, I'm looking for a job. And Sapphir's like, we have no jobs. This is heaven. Go to hell. So he goes down to hell, and hell's just terrible. There's no toilets. There's no running water. There's no air conditioners. There's no escalators. And so the engineer gets to work. He does indoor plumbing. Then he does air conditioners. And he does, escalators and all these wonderful things. And St. Peter goes, he sees the devil. And the devil is like, I got air conditioning. I got escalators. I got all these wonderful things. St. Peter's like, where did you get the engineer? I'll sue you and get it back. And Satan's like, well, where are you going to get the lawyer? But, so, that's the joke. But engineers are all about making the world a better place. And yeah, the boss is probably going to get insanely rich while he does this and insanely powerful. But at the same time, there's less people starving. And, there's more creature comforts for everybody. It's like, okay, yeah, so he has huge mountains of gold and silver and more money than he can ever spend. But guess what? There are fields being plowed by tractors, and there are people who are making 10 times as much wheat and 100 times as much bread. And so there's like food everywhere in abundance, and clothes. And as I've said before, clothes are something that are very difficult up until you get into the modern era. Because if you have to spin all of the wool, all of the flax by hand, and weave it by hand, and then cut it and piece it together by hand. It takes a long time and a lot of effort to just make a yard of fabric. To make a shirt like this would be impossible. I mean, you would not see a shirt that's made like this until, you'd have to go into the 1800s. You could probably get fabric this fine, this fine and this soft, maybe in the 1600s, 1500s, when they started really firing things up in Milan. And then you could have somebody hand paint in all of the flamingos and all of the palm leaves. And that would be an incredible amount of work. And I mean, this would be something that a king would wear. And the king would be like, look at this shirt. Can you believe what I wear? Except they'd probably make it gaudier and jewel encrusted because, you got to show off gaudy and jewel encrusted. But making these colors, there's a color fest. I've worn this shirt a few times. And the black is still black, and the pink is still pink, and the blue is still blue. And that's not easy. Well, black is kind of easy, but getting it fixed, getting the mordants is a little bit more difficult. But the thing is that this is not an easy proposition to make a shirt like this. And the thing is the boss is working on factories, and so everybody can have a shirt, and everybody can have a pair of pants, and everyone can have 2 shirts and pants, one to wash and one to wear. And, people will not be freezing and people will not be starving. And, if the cost of that is him getting rich, so be it. So be it.